Hey everybody, it is Sam and Kayley from the Boulder City Library, and we're here with another How Not to Burn Toast. And this month, we're doing Can. So we're going to talk about canned food, and Sam prepared some delicious yummies that she'll add an edit of her video at the end of this little chat that we'll have. And then hopefully this weekend, I'll also, with movie magic, I'll have a video at the end as well. So we're going to talk about different ways of canning food, the different foods that can be canned, and so on and so forth. Sam knows a lot more about this subject than I do, but we're both excited to bring this episode to you guys this month.
So we're going to start off with the easy thing. What is canning? It is this. No. So it's a process that basically makes food storable. Stuff that is normally perishable can now be stored for a longer time. So basically, there's a couple of different ways, but we're going to be talking about home canning. So in home canning, we use glass jars like this at a high temperature, and basically the cooking interrupts like spoilage and stuff like that, destroys contaminants, and then it removes the air from these jars and basically creates kind of like a little vacuum inside so that no bacteria can live in here. And then the food can be shipped or it can be stored in your pantry for quite a while. Normally home canned stuff, they say about a year, but I've eaten things that have been longer than that. And you'll know, like cans you buy from the grocery store, they have more preservatives and stuff in them, but sometimes last multiple years. And there are like videos on YouTube of people finding like old like ration kits from World War II, Vietnam, Korea, and eating things out of those that have been canned. I don't necessarily recommend that.
Yeah, I don't think
Probably
that
not
would be a good
tasty,
idea.
but they do that, so you can watch those on YouTube.
But it is a good idea, like if you were interested in eating lots of canned food and keeping that in your pantry, because if you can it yourself, then you know everything that goes inside. Maybe if you're like watching your sugar or something, they also have different like methods for canning for people with low sugar intakes and things like that. So you know what's going into your canned food. So that's always good too.
So your history tidbit for today is that Napoleon had a hand in creating canning. Yeah, love Napoleon. So he was looking for a way, because he was conquering everything, to extend his like supply lines. So feed his army. So he put out this giant reward, and someone came up with canning back in 1809. So canning's actually in the realm of food things fairly new. So are refrigerators, but canning is only a couple hundred years old, but we do it at home a lot. I mean, after it was created, they did it at home a lot because people were doing the whole manifest destiny thing and conquering, the wild, wild west. So the next big question: what can I can?
Yeah,
pretty much everything. If you're like us and watch food TV, you'll have seen people pull whole chickens out of cans.
Oh yeah,
It's really gross.
No, scary things to find at your grocery store, whole chicken in a can.
Right. Gross. So meats are included, seafood, everything like that can be canned.
Yeah.
But we're most used to seeing things like pickles, jams, stuff like that. So what you're canning actually will tell you what kind of method you need to can, and there's two. One is water bath canning, which is what we'll be talking about today. And those are for high acid foods like pickles, jams, which you don't think are high acid, but actually are, and things like that. For low acid food like meats, anything with meat in it is a low acid food. You need pressure canning, and that's much more complicated and uses expensive tools, so we don't do it. So we're going to talk about water bath canning. So water bath canning it's a low temperature in comparison to pressure canning. So it's boiling water versus above boiling water. So high acid foods and recipes, and have to have that because that helps kill the yeast, bacteria, and stuff like that. Otherwise, your food will grow mold, and that's gross. Not penicillin. So the pressure canning is at 240 degrees, and the only way you can do that is by raising the inside pressure, just like your Instapot does. So water bath canning is super easy to do at home, only uses a few tools that don't cost that much, and you already may have at home. So the tools you need for water bath canning: glass jars, bands, lids. You can buy all those things. I got all mine at Target. They're a little harder to find right now because I think everyone is canning.
Or everyone really likes to drink their drinking water out of these cute little mason jars.
I know I do.
Maybe.
And then you need your canning rig, which is a deep pot, and you want deep because it has to be able to cover the jars. So especially if you're using the big quart jars, you need something pretty tall.
And they normally say to cover for about like 2 to 3 inches,
Right.
but more the better too.
You need some kind of rack to keep the glass off the bottom because you don't want it shattering. You can buy like toolkits. You can use like little round cake racks.
Yeah.
I take my extra bands and zip tie them together and
That's a
use
really
them
good idea too.
because I can't find my rack right now. You need tongs because these get really hot. They've been in boiling water for anywhere from, these take 10 minutes, these took a half an hour out. So you need tongs to lift them out. And that's really all you need. You can get things like a jar lifter, which makes taking jars out of it easy. A bubble freer, which sounds really cool. It looks just kind of like a butter knife. And it helps you when you're making jams or anything super hot. And a funnel, which also helps you when making jams.
Yeah.
So right now we're going to show you some videos. The first one will be of me, and I made pickles. And we're going to talk about these pickles because my first video did not actually work when I was doing it. My camera died. So these are pickled beets. Yum, yum, yum. I know they don't sound good, but they actually are super tasty. And so you're going to learn all about how to create pickles and how to can them. So today we're talking about water bath canning. And this is a water bath. I have my canning jars, which are just normal pint-sized canning jars in here sterilizing because you do not want any microbials in your whatever you're making, whether it be jam or pickles or some kind of other thing. That is what turns your food gross. So you have to sterilize your jars, and it's very hot. Basically boiling for about 10 minutes, and then you can take them out and start your canning. So there are a bunch of tools you can use to take out jars. You could just use tongs and stuff like that, but they do make jar tools, and they're a lot easier to use than just, you know, your regular tongs. Though I will say it is kind of hard to see the jars in water because they're clear. You can get really fancy jars if you want, but just the regular old ball jars work just fine, just like your grandma used to use. But I've got about 6 in here. That's all my canner can really hold. Actually, it can really only hold 5, but I managed to get 6 in there. And be careful when you're doing this, because like I said, this is all really, really hot. You can scald yourself. I have already once today. You don't want to do that. It hurts. And you'll notice I'm wearing gloves. It's not necessarily because I'm worried about burning myself. It's because we are going to be pickling beets today. And beets are red. Well, they're also yellow. But I'm using just plain old regular beets today. And if you're not careful, you end up looking like a murderer. So I wear gloves whenever I work with beets, because that stuff is really hard to get out of your skin.
So now I have all my jars ready. And like I said, we're making pickles today using beets. Now, to make pickles, and this includes the cucumber kind that we're all familiar with, you use just a few things. You use some type of vinegar. I'm using apple cider vinegar. You use sugar, just plain old white sugar. And then there are two things in here. There are peppercorns, so spices, and then you have things like salt. You need salt when you're making a brine. Salt, sugar, and acid make a brine. You don't actually ever need any spices, it just makes things taste better. So this is pickling or canning salt. It is a finer grain of salt, so it dissolves in liquids easier. So I recommend using that when you're canning. Some of your recipes might call for regular salt. Use whatever your recipe calls for because it's measured for that. So now we're going to take these beets, and I've cut them into about 1/4 of an inch. And they were huge beets, so I had to quarter them at that. And now I'm just going to fill my little jars with beets. And this will make a mess. This can stain your countertop because the red in beets is really red. And thus the gloves. You can turn it off. So you'll notice mine edges got a little bit dirty. You'll want to clean those off, especially when you're using something like beets, because believe it or not, beets are extremely high in sugar. In fact, not these kind of beets, but other beets are used to make most granulated sugar that you eat. I know, I grew up in a town that's major industry was that they smell horrible when they're processing them. However, when you're making pickled beets, they smell good. So I had about 3 pounds of beets, and I got 4 jars out of it with a little beets left over for a snack. And then I cleaned my jars off. And now, the pickling solution that I made. So this one actually has cinnamon, allspice, and one more thing, cloves in it. So it's kind of like Christmassy, I would say. But it has apple cider vinegar, sugar, water, and then you just pour over your beets. And you want to pour a little bit at a time because you'll notice the glug, glug, glug. You want to leave about 1/4 of an inch to an inch of headspace, which is normally about the bottom rings right there. And then you can poke around and get some of the air out. You can also use a fancy dancy tool like this. This is really handy when you're doing jams. We're gonna just pour in here. Glug, glug, glug. Ooh, did you? Oh. So now I'm trying to get the air bubbles out because I don't want any air bubbles in there, or as little air in there as I can, because that's the whole idea of water bath canning, is get all the air out. So now I'm going to grab my tops. And these are what tops look like. This is the glue that will hold it on there. You used to have to warm them up too. Apparently you don't have to do that any longer, but I kept them in hot water, slightly out of habit, but just in case. So you put these on top. And then you take a band. And your bands go on finger tight. You don't want it so tight that the air can't escape. Because what you're going to do is create a vacuum in here to force all the air out, so there's, and I think it's called anaerobic environment, so there's nothing for any kind of bacteria or anything to grow in there. You can only do water bath canning with high acid foods, so anything that uses a lot of vinegar, fruits, lots of sugar, and jams and stuff. If you're doing something like meat, which you can meat, yeah, I know it sounds gross, but you have to use a pressure canner, and that's a totally different thing, and I have never done that before. So I have another tool right here, handy dandy jar lifter. Comes in really handy when you're going to be standing over a pot of boiling water. And we just drop this in. You want it to be straight up and down if possible, because at an angle it will mess up and not get all the air out properly. You'll notice my water level's rising as I go on. You have to remember that too. The water does need to cover the jars but you don't want it to overflow, so I'm trying to keep an eye on it so I know if I need to take out water. You also don't want your jars touching if at all possible. So you'll notice I have to finagle a little bit to get all the jars in. And don't stick your hand in there. So then when I get my jars in, I can use the little tool right here to help straighten them and get them properly in place, because this one's being a pain. And there we go. So now, pickled beets take a little bit longer. It made a liar out of me, turned over. Pickled beets take a little bit longer than, that's why. Most other things. They take about a half an hour. So you are not only getting rid of all the oxygen with this, you are also cooking the beets. And your beets should already be pre-cooked, but this will finish everything off. And in about a half an hour, you'll be able to take them out. Okay, so it's been a half an hour. That means our jars are ready, and I don't see any air bubbles coming up anymore, so that's good. So we're going to take our handy dandy jar lifter, get in there, and bring it out. You can also turn them off and let them sit for 5 minutes. They recommend that a lot. I don't think you really have to. But remember, these are extremely hot, so be very careful. So now you've got to let them cool overnight at least, sometimes 24 hours, and that way the jars will seal all the way as they cool. It will force the rest of the air out. So we'll come back to these tomorrow and see if they're all ready.
So that's really how you make pickles. Pickles are really easy to make, and they can be made out of a ton of different things, including watermelon rinds, very big in the South. Radishes, these are pickled daikon radishes. You can pickle fruits, vegetables,
Green beans.
They're really tasty. So check out like the Ball website, which is the people who make these cans, has a lot of recipes on it for pickling, and they're super tasty and easy to make yourself, including the classic cucumber ones. And I'm really used to those because my family, well, part of my family owns a pickle factory. So pickles have been a part of my life for a really long time, so I like to make my own because I can customize them. And our next video is going to be a different type of canning. You don't see that often anymore. These jars are also freezer friendly. So Kaylee is going to show you her grandma's, so we know it's good, freezer jam recipe.
Okay everybody, with movie magic, I'm now here in my kitchen and we're gonna make some freezer jam together. Before in the larger video, Sam and I talked about how some different cannings you can use heat treatments to make sure that your jars become pressurized. But this, we're going to talk about a really easy way to kind of enter canning where all you have to do is put your product in the freezer. So it's a lot easier than other methods, and I think it's a good kind of entry level, maybe gateway into playing around with canning and seeing what you can. So we're going to be making a simple freezer jam. So what I have already prepped is I have some strawberries that I cut up. So for this specific recipe, it is 1 cup and 2/3 cup of strawberries to 2/3 cup of sugar and 2 tablespoons of pectin. I got my pectin from our local Albertsons here in Boulder City, and I got the Sure Gel pectin. It was on the very top shelf. But you'll want to just find the pectin that is for homemade jams and jellies. And in the case some of them are marketed, they specifically say freezer pectins, and you can use those as well, obviously, since we're going to be freezing. But just like we talked about in the video, these jars with the lids and the rings, they are good for heat treating, but they're also good for putting in the freezer. So, to get started, I have my 2 disinfected jars. I have my prepped strawberries, and then with Movie Magic, I prepped my sugar and my pectin mixed together in this jar for easy pouring. But so now we're first going to start, you'll want to blend your strawberries just a little bit. So we'll get these into my blender. And I just roughly diced these up so that I could fit them into my measuring cups. But it's not really an exact science. You just want a good pectin to fruit to sugar ratio. Let's see. And then you'll just want to blend this a little bit. And since I have a less traditional blender, I'm just going to check really fast. But so you can see that our fruit here is kind of mashed up pretty good. It's starting to release its natural sugars and juices, so I would say that's pretty good. So for this specific recipe, and I'll leave it linked down below, we're just going to take our nice strawberry mixture and pour it over our pectin and sugar mixture, making a bit of a mess in your kitchen as you go along. Then, cut this out. And then for this specific recipe, you want to stir all of the jam together for 2 to 3 minutes. And this isn't just to incorporate things. This is to make sure that the pectin gets activated and the sugar starts to dissolve inside of your fruit, so that by the time that we pour it into the jars, it kind of starts to react together. We're still stirring our wonderful jam, and the beautiful sounds of Luigi's Mansion are in the background. You can do this with any kind of fruit you want. Me and my dad, you can make this with any kind of fruit. Me and my dad have made peach jam before, and that turned out really well, and we kind of stocked our freezer with it when we made it with peaches from, like a big case of peaches from Utah one year, and we ate it for years. Normally this will last good in the freezer for about 1 to 2 years, but as long as it looks good and it smells good, it's okay if your homemade jam lasts longer in the freezer. It just may, like we talked about in our last How Not to Burn Toast, putting foods in the freezer may, for a long extended period of time, may deteriorate the taste, and that's why you don't want to leave things in for too long. Okay, so we're done mixing all of our fruit, and you can see that it's kind of foaming now, and it's very liquidy, but the mixing kind of helped activate the natural pectin in the fruit, and once we put this in the freezer, it will tense back up and kind of form that gelatinous jelly or preserves kind of texture. We're going to put this in one, and we're going to take it to Great Grandma Robinson tomorrow and see what she thinks, because she's been making this for decades. But so, once you finish with your jam, you'll want to secure your lid on the top very tightly, and then it will sit at room temperature for 1 hour, and then you'll go ahead and put it in the freezer. And I will add either a clip after this or a picture of me opening this jam and showing you how it turned out. Alright, thanks everybody, happy cooking!
Doesn't that look delicious?
A freezer jam.
Jam.
Definitely.
So good.
This was my little great grandma Robinson's been making this jam every year for Thanksgiving for I don't know how long, probably over like longer than I've been alive, longer than Sam's been alive. And she always makes them with these little biscuits. And all of her grandkids and children always sneak into the kitchen while everybody is like busy doing things on Thanksgiving Day and try and smuggle the jam and the biscuits home. So this is always something that's been really great and fun in our family. And it was actually super easy to make and figure out the recipe. She did tell me eventually that it was just on the back of the pectin box. So, you know, she's just sneaky like that. But.
It was probably someone's grandma's recipe at one point.
Oh yeah,
So,
definitely.
I love jams. They're the best thing in the world.
Yeah, but speaking of, I wanted to ask, how did you get into canning?
My grandma.
Your grandma.
I grew up in Michigan in farm country. We had apple trees and all that kind of fun stuff. So my grandma my mom's mom used to can a lot. She did jams, and she also did applesauce. You can can your own applesauce.
Oh, my
too.
grandma does that too. She does
Yes.
apple butter.
Yeah, apple butter, always super tasty.
Mhm.
So yeah, grandmas seem to be the people who get you into a lot of
Oh
this
yeah,
stuff.
definitely.
Right. So there's one last thing I want to talk about because I forgot to talk about it earlier and it's not in my video. So how do I know my water bath canning was successful? Because you don't want mold. You want to be able to eat your stuff. It's actually really super simple. When you put these tops on originally, they kind of like pop up. You'll see like on top of jars of relish and stuff, they're like, if the lid pops,
Mhm.
don't buy this because it's been opened before. So all you have to do is press down on here, and if it does not pop back, your jar is sealed. As they're cooling down, you'll hear them go pop, and that normally means that they're good. You also don't have to keep the bands on them. Once that jar is sealed, it's sealed. The only thing you need the bands for is once you open it to keep it sealed. And you'll notice I don't know if you can see it very well in the video. There's a bunch of white stuff on mine. Just wipe your jars off. Our water is really hard here.
Yeah.
And it leaves deposits on there. It won't hurt your product at all. So with these, if you make pickled beets, it's normally better to leave them for like 4 to 8 weeks to kind of like flavor up before you crack them open and eat them. These are ready in 48 hours. So I'll put links out to both of these recipes in the description. So that is really our canning show, and we hope that you liked being able to see us actually kind of do it this time instead of just listening
Yeah.
to us talk.
And we hope it gives you a little bit of inspiration to maybe look at some of the fresh things that are offered at the grocery store and think about how you might want to can them or something like that. Maybe to try it for like maybe once or twice.
Right.
Because it is fun. It's a fun way to get together with family members and kind of make gifts for the holidays
Right.
or just spend time together. And speaking of holidays, Sam, do you want to announce the next How Not to Burn Toast episode?
So the next How Not to Burn Toast episode is all about my favorite holiday, Thanksgiving. We know a lot of people aren't going to be able to do their extremely large family gatherings this year, so some of you may be doing your own Thanksgiving for the first time ever. I've been cooking Thanksgiving since I was like 12.
She cooked Thanksgiving last week for her home dinner.
My family likes to eat turkey. Full Thanksgivings a lot. It's really weird. But we're gonna go over how to make all of the mains, like your turkey, and all the sides in easy ways so that you're not overwhelmed on the day of. Because let me tell you, it can be super overwhelming.
Yeah.
But it's actually really easy as long as you stick to a timeline.
Yeah.
So we're going to teach you how to make your turkey. We're going to teach you how to make your stuffing and your mashed potatoes, some side dishes, and maybe even some dessert.
Yeah.
So that you're all ready to handle Thanksgiving when the time comes. So we're really excited about that one because I like eating all that stuff.
So if you're cooking Thanksgiving dinner for the first time, it might be a good one to tune into.
And our other food-related event is the Cook the Book Club, and that's on the third Thursday.
So in 2 weeks, 2 weeks from when this video goes up, we'll be having a little chat about a cookbook. It is the fall
edition, or
It is the fall cookbook of Fix It and Forget It.
Fix It and Forget It. So crock-pot cooking,
Yes, crock-pot cooking.
which also comes in very handy at Thanksgiving.
Yes,
So
and
you-
it's available on our Hoopla, so you can check it out
Mhm.
online, and everyone can check it out at the same time. So
Yep,
it'll be good.
and we like to talk about how you did some recipes in there, and you can tell us all about what went well, what didn't, and what changes you will make. Because they're fairly simple recipes when I looked at them, so that means they're good for novices and you out there who are more advanced and like to experiment. Please let us know, because
Yeah.
we like food.
Or also if you just want a one-pot dinner with
Right.
no dishes, it's great too.
Super great. So that's our How Not to Burn Toast. Can.
Yes.
So if you do some canning after watching this, please let us know on our Facebook. We have Twitter too, and we have Instagram, so you can tag us. And you can also email us or tweet at us or Facebook us and let us know any topics you would like to see.
Or call us on the phone.
Call us on the phone.
702-293-1281. Sam can do movie magic and just put it right here on the screen.
Yeah, we'll figure out how to put it in here somewhere. We are here, and we'd like to do things that you want to see, because we like doing these. These are kind of fun.
And we're trying to connect with you guys, even though the library is still partially closed right now and we can't do physical in-person programs.
So thank you for tuning in,
Yeah.
and we will see you next month.
All right. Bye, everybody.
Bye.